Now let's take you through the undercover mission code name, 24 Hours Mission. In the pale light of dawn, a man named Andriy sat alone in a dimly lit room in Kyiv. A leather-bound dossier rested on the table before him, its edges worn but the contents within fresh with urgency. Andriy was no stranger to peril. A former intelligence officer for Ukraine, his life had been a perpetual dance on the edge of a blade. But this mission, this singular assignment, was unlike anything he had ever faced. "You leave in an hour," said the voice of General Mikhailo, gravelly and commanding. Mikhailo stood by the window of the safe house, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the pale light of dawn. He turned to Andriy, his eyes sharp but shadowed by exhaustion. "This is the last time we will speak before you go, Andriy. No mistakes. This mission requires perfection." Andriy, seated at the table, nodded slowly. His leather dossier sat open before him, its contents neatly arranged, forged identification papers, blueprints of the compound, and a photograph of the man who had brought the world to its knees. The weight of the mission hung heavy in the air. Mikhailo crossed the room, his boots heavy against the wooden floor. "You've trained for years for this moment, but I know the stakes weigh on you. They weigh on me too." He placed a firm hand on Andriy's shoulder. "You're not just carrying out an operation. You're representing the resilience of Ukraine itself." Andriy met his gaze, his jaw tightening. "Understood, sir. I won't fail." "I know," Mikhailo said after a pause. "Because failure isn't an option." The night before the mission, Andriy sat on the edge of his cot in a Spartan safe house on the outskirts of Kyiv. The safe house itself was nondescript, tucked into a row of aging brick buildings that bore the scars of conflict, shattered windows hastily boarded up, walls pocked with bullet holes. It was the kind of place designed to be overlooked, forgotten, blending into the battered cityscape of a country at war. Yet inside, every corner of the room seemed to press down on Andriy, as if the mission's enormity had taken physical form. The room's only adornment was a map pinned to the wall, dotted with circles and scribbled notes. A small table nearby held a single cup of black coffee, untouched and cold. The clock ticked steadily, each second dragging the weight of the impending mission closer. The rhythmic sound was oppressive, amplifying the silence that hung in the air. Each tick seemed louder than the last, a countdown not just to the mission but to a potential end. Andriy's hand hovered near his leather dossier, the smooth surface a stark contrast to the rough calluses of his fingers. He traced the edges absent-mindedly, as if grounding himself for what was to come. Lena, his handler, leaned against the doorway, her silhouette illuminated by the dim light of the hallway. She carried an air of quiet authority, her sharp features partially softened by exhaustion. A faint scar ran across her temple, a reminder of her own sacrifices in this war. In her hands, she held a small file folder, but her gaze was fixed on Andriy, studying him as though trying to decipher the thoughts hidden behind his stoic demeanor. She was younger than Andriy, her sharp features softened by concern. "Do you ever think about what happens if you don't come back?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. Andriy didn't respond immediately. His mind wandered, the room fading as a flood of memories threatened to surface. He ran his fingers over the edges of the dossier, its contents burned into his memory. Yet, it was not the mission he saw, it was a face, one he hadn't allowed himself to think about in years. The image of a woman, her laughter ringing out against the backdrop of a summer afternoon, pierced through his composure. The smell of sunflowers, the warmth of her hand, their child playing in the distance. The sudden, brutal realization that the war had taken him both surged like a tidal wave. His fingers clenched involuntarily, the edges of the dossier digging into his palms. "There's nothing left for me here, Lena," he said finally. "If I don't come back, it just means I finally finished something." Lena frowned. "You're not a martyr, Andriy. Remember that. Get in, get out. Survive. That's the job." The room fell silent as she stepped out, the faint echo of her footsteps receding into the hallway. Andriy sat motionless for a moment before exhaling deeply, the tension in his chest easing only slightly. He glanced at the dossier once more but didn't open it. Instead, his gaze shifted to the cracked ceiling above, where a faint web of lines formed patterns he had traced countless times. His mind wandered to the faces he would never see again, and he clenched his fists to steady himself. There was no room for hesitation, no space for grief. In this moment, he was not a man but a weapon honed for a single purpose. He lay back on the cot, staring at the cracked ceiling. The faint hum of traffic outside faded as he focused on the task ahead. There was no room for fear or doubt, only precision. The truck rumbled steadily along the highway, its old diesel engine roaring with every gear shift. Inside the cab, Andriy's thoughts drifted to darker corners. He could still hear the whispered doubts of his peers back in Kyiv. Why him? They had asked, some in admiration, others in skepticism. Does he think this mission will absolve him of his ghosts? Andriy clenched the wheel tighter, his knuckles whitening. He didn't need absolution, he needed clarity. Every choice he'd made, every line he'd crossed, had led to this moment. For the first time in years, he felt a sliver of purpose, sharp and cutting, driving him forward. The first checkpoint appeared on the horizon, a grim fortress of concrete barriers and armed guards. The queue of vehicles crawled forward under the watchful eyes of Russian soldiers. Surveillance cameras mounted on poles swiveled methodically, capturing every detail. When his turn came, Andriy rolled down the window, the cold air biting his face. A young officer with sharp features stepped forward, his rifle slung casually over his shoulder. "Papers," he demanded. Andriy handed over the forged documents, his expression calm. "Late delivery for a bakery in Moscow," he said, gesturing toward the back of the truck. The officer scanned the papers, his gaze flicking between them and Andriy. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. Andriy complied, his movements deliberate and unthreatening. He unlatched the tarp, revealing neatly stacked sacks of flour. The officer climbed onto the truck bed, poking at the cargo with a baton. Beneath the surface, concealed compartments held his true payload, but the officer's cursory inspection revealed nothing amiss. After what felt like an eternity, the officer jumped down, handing back the papers. "Move along," he said curtly. As Andriy drove away, his pulse steadied, but the mental weight of what lay ahead grew heavier. Meanwhile, across Moscow, an underground resistance cell prepared to act. The room was dimly lit, a single bulb swaying slightly above a rusted table. The walls were lined with crates of outdated equipment, leaflets urging resistance, and maps riddled with pins and annotations. At the center, a map of Moscow's sewer systems lay sprawled across a table, its edges frayed from overuse. "We don't even know if he's real," said Sergei, her second in command, his voice edged with frustration. "What if this, Andriy, is just bait for us?" He slammed his fist against the table, causing one of the pins to topple onto the map. Daria's expression hardened as she stared down Sergei. Her fingers traced a route along the map, pausing at a marked exit. "We don't have the luxury of doubt, Sergei," she said firmly. "Andriy is risking his life for this. If he succeeds, it's our chance to strike at the heart of their operations. However, we'll find out soon enough. This isn't about trust, it's about action. We've been waiting too long for a chance like this. If he's real, he'll need our help. If he's not, we'll expose the lie. Either way, we act." Sergei scoffed but said nothing more. The room was tense, filled with quiet murmurs as resistance members prepared their equipment. Old but reliable weapons, communications devices, and explosive charges were spread out across the table. Their task was anything but simple. The Resistance's plan hinged on precision and risk. Daria divided the team into 3 groups. each assigned to a specific area of the city. One team would sabotage a key power substation, plunging parts of the city into darkness. Another would ignite a distraction in the heart of Moscow, a fabricated protest meant to sow confusion. Daria's own team prepared to intercept military communication lines. Every move brought the authorities closer to their trail, and every second felt stolen. As the city lit up with false alarms and scrambling security forces, the resistance members moved like ghosts through sewers and alleyways, vanishing before they could be caught. Each success was tempered by the knowledge that discovery was inevitable. After hours of navigating Moscow's outskirts, Andriy parked in a quiet alley. The transition was seamless. A quick change into a grey maintenance jumpsuit and a swap of his truck for a nondescript van parked nearby. The toolbox he carried was unremarkable on the outside but contained an arsenal of high-tech tools, including a compact drone, a signal jammer, and a disassembled silenced firearm. The abandoned apartment overlooking the compound served as his observation post. Andriy set up his equipment with practiced efficiency, beginning with a high-powered monocular and a laptop synced to his drone. The drone's silent rotors carried it over the compound's high walls, its camera capturing a detailed map of the grounds. Through thermal imaging, Andriy identified security measures invisible to the naked eye. Pressure-sensitive tiles near the entrances, infrared beams crisscrossing the garden, and guards whose patrols overlapped with military precision. Every detail went into his notebook, a blueprint for what lay ahead. The intercepted radio chatter provided further insights. A scheduled delivery at 2 a.m. presented an opportunity for distraction, while a maintenance check at 3 a.m. would grant him access under the guise of routine work. Andriy's mind raced as he pieced together a plan, accounting for contingencies and potential failures. By the 12th hour, the plan was set. It was time to move. Disguised as an HVAC technician, Andriy approached the service entrance of the compound under the cover of night. The dim floodlights above the gate cast long shadows across the cobblestone driveway. He kept his pace measured, his toolbox in one hand and his forged ID badge in the other. As he neared the checkpoint, the sharp clatter of guards' boots on the ground drew his attention. A dog barked from within a nearby kennel, its growl slicing through the tense silence. Andriy inhaled deeply, centering himself, and handed over his badge to the guard. His forged ID badge passed the guard's scrutiny, though the man's gaze lingered a moment too long. "You're late," the guard muttered. "Traffic," Andriy replied, his tone neutral. Inside, the mansion was a labyrinth of opulence and meticulous security. Chandeliers hung from the ceilings, their crystals casting fractured light across the marble floors. But Andriy had no time to admire the luxury. His first objective was the maintenance room, a hub of circuits and servers tucked in a less monitored wing of the building. Moving through the corridors, Andriy noted the placement of cameras, their rotations precise yet predictable. Each turn brought a new wave of tension as he skirted patrolling guards, their radios crackling with static. He adjusted his cap, using its brim to obscure his face from the occasional glance. Andriy moved with purpose, blending in with the staff as he made his way to the control room. There, he planted a device to loop the security camera feeds, granting him a 5-minute window of invisibility. The pre-planned distractions unfolded like clockwork. A loud explosion from the maintenance shed shook the ground, followed by a plume of smoke rising into the night sky. Andriy checked his watch, right on schedule. The guards near the east wing immediately scrambled, shouting orders into their radios as they rushed to investigate. Simultaneously, the fire alarm in the guesthouse blared, triggering sprinklers and adding to the mounting chaos. As the compound's security fragmented, Andriy moved swiftly but deliberately, his every step calculated to avoid detection. He slipped past a trio of distracted guards, ducking into a dimly lit storage room to await his next window. A small explosion in the maintenance shed triggered alarms, while a fire in the guesthouse drew guards away from the main building. Amid the chaos, Andriy navigated the corridors, his movements precise and deliberate. Finally, he reached the study, his breathing steady but his senses on high alert. The double doors creaked open slightly as Andriy peered inside. The room exuded power. A massive oak desk dominated the center, flanked by bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes. A crackling fireplace cast flickering shadows across the walls. Behind the desk sat the bad guy, expression unreadable, flanked by two bodyguards who stood like statues, their hands resting on their holstered pistols. Andriy adjusted his grip on the concealed weapon tucked in his jacket, his mind racing through every possible scenario as he stepped into the room. Andriy wasted no time, assembling his weapon with practiced efficiency. But before he could fire, the bad guy spoke. "You think we didn't know?" His voice was calm, almost amused. The bodyguards moved, but Andriy was faster. 2 shots rang out, and they collapsed. As he turned the gun on the bad guy, a sharp pain exploded in his side. He staggered, his vision blurring as he saw a tranquilizer dart embedded in his ribs. The last thing he saw was the bad guy standing over him, a faint smile on his lips. Andriy awoke in a dimly lit cell, his hands bound and his head pounding. Across from him sat a man in a tailored suit, his expression cold and calculating. "You're valuable," the man said. "But only if you cooperate." The interrogation that followed was relentless. Andriy endured threats, manipulation, and psychological tactics, but his training held firm. He revealed nothing, his silence a shield against their probing. When the opportunity arose, Andriy seized it. Feigning weakness, he slumped against the cold wall of his cell, coughing violently. The guard outside glanced in, his brow furrowed. "What's wrong with him?" he muttered to his colleague. When no response came, the guard hesitated before stepping inside. Andriy struck like a coiled viper, lunging at the man's throat and silencing him with a precise hold. Within seconds, the guard lay unconscious, his weapon and keycard in Andriy's hands. Quickly donning the man's uniform, Andriy moved into the hallway, his senses heightened as he navigated the facility's sterile corridors. Security cameras dotted the ceiling, but their blind spots, memorized from his earlier surveillance, allowed him to slip through undetected. Improvising as he went, he set small charges on key junction boxes, plunging sections of the compound into darkness and chaos. The sound of panicked voices and distant alarms masked his movements as he climbed a maintenance ladder to a service hatch leading outside. Using the guard's keycard, he navigated the facility, improvising explosives to create chaos and mask his escape. By the 24th hour, Andriy emerged into the cold Moscow night. His body ached, his mission incomplete, but he was alive. As he disappeared into the shadows, he resolved to return stronger, armed with the knowledge he had gained. The war was far from over, and Andriy was determined to fight another day. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment. We appreciate your feedback.